So, welcome to another episode of Off Her Tree, the podcast where we dive deep into the wild, unexpected, and transformational journey of awakening. And today we have Collette Barnes Whiteman, a seeker for many years and who self-realized in 2022, who now dedicates her life to sharing the methods which worked for her with others in order to help them to see that they don't have to suffer the thoughts our minds offer us. Rested in being, Collette is able to choose to not entertain the push and pull of the mental mind-made self and has developed simple and effective pointers for people who are looking for their true nature. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me.
Very welcome. It's lovely to have you on because I've been involved in a few of your sessions and found it very, very worthwhile and interesting, very helpful. Don't get me wrong, I'm in and out. in and out. But
that feeling.
Oh, yeah. So can you take us back to the beginning of your awakening journey, and kind of, I guess, the unfolding of that, and whether there was just a pivotal moment as well?
So I'm just feeling into that. I'm like, okay, where has all that gone? It's funny, I was talking to people today in a little group that I had, and I was talking about, I would say it was probably one of the big moments was seeing Muji on Facebook. Somebody had shared a video of his. And I wasn't even on YouTube at that point, so I hadn't seen any of his satsangs or anything to do with that. And my children were little and they're 20 now, 22, 19. So it was quite a long time ago, about 18 years ago. And I saw him on screen, and the experience was that I just dropped out of my head into my heart and went bang. And all I could feel is that I'd fallen in love with him. But I knew I'd not fallen in love with the person. You know, I didn't want to go off and marry him or chase after him or any of that. I just fell in love and didn't really understand it, but knew it wasn't him. And then I would have pictures around the house of him, or, you know, by my bed. My kids were like, "Mommy loves Muji. What about poor Daddy?" And it was just something I couldn't really explain. And I did go to jumping ahead, I did go to a satsang of his in Brighton in Brixton. And he didn't have loads of followers at that point. And a funny thing that happened was I was stood at the back of the satsang because I couldn't get in. Everybody was already seated. Everybody was got their seats and they were ahead of the game, and I'd never been. So I was at the back of the room, and the door was next to me, and they were breaking for lunch. And I thought, okay, great. My mind had almost joined the sandwich queue. You know, that's how the mind works. What next? What next? What next?
Yeah.
So it was sort of heading out the door. And as we broke, I was running towards the stage. My legs were running. My heart, it was like a cartoon. My heart was beating out of my chest, and my mind was going, "What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?"
Wow.
And my legs just ran towards the stage. I was third in the queue. And apparently that's what people do when he finishes. They go up for a hug or some little interaction. And I didn't know this. I'd never been to a satsang, and I'd not really seen them online, and not the whole thing. You normally just get clips of them. So I'd not seen how it all operates. So, but I also knew I didn't want to hug. I wanted to look in his eyes. And it was that light, you know, there was some recognition that that's what I was looking for. I wanted that's in his eyes. And when I went up, he went to hug me, and I said, "Is it okay if I look in your eyes?" And he was like, "Yes, of course." So it sort of held hands, and I looked in his eyes. And I'm not saying there was some amazing thing happening. It was just, that was the draw. And then the next day I was in the middle of the room. I'd got a bit early. I'd got everything down now. Got to get there a bit early. And I was sat in the middle. And he spends the first 15 minutes looking in everybody's eyes. He makes eye contact with everybody. He doesn't do it now because it's so big. But then when there was, you know, he would, and we met instead of me looking towards him to his eyes, It's like we just met in the middle of the room and it was like bang. And I was like, oh, I couldn't really put it into words what it was. It was just, oh, okay. So we met. There was some meeting. And then the third day, I couldn't even get in the main room. I was in an extra room that they had with a little doorway, so you couldn't see him. And again, my mind was like, I can't see him. I can't see him. I need to be able to see him. But then there was some wisdom that just said, he's everywhere. He's everywhere. Don't need to see him. And I was like, of course. And then I just sat down and just went into bliss. And that was sort of the main part of my spiritual practice, really. I did see Eckhart a couple of times as well. So they were my two main teachers, really. And all I ever did was listen to them and go to being, go to the truth of our being, you know, drop the mind, drop mental activity, just be. But I didn't really, I always felt they were doing it to me. And I guess in a way you're listening to their words and they are guiding you home. But I just didn't recognize what that home was. I just put it all on them. They were guiding me to there, and it was their presence. And all of that is right. But there wasn't that recognition that, oh, so there's this one being, this one self that we all are. And I hadn't got that. No matter what they were saying to me, I'm sure they were saying it over and over again. But all I ever did was just allow the words to wash over me and just bask in being. Then, of course, because I hadn't seen through the eye, through this idea, my identity. So whenever I left, whatever hall or wherever, you know, I would just pick up the eye. So the thoughts then I believed were mine. And oh, it's raining. Oh no, what? Oh, I hate the rain. And you bang, you're the character in the rain that doesn't like it, needs this moment to be any other way. You've just had 3 hours of bliss. And it was just the contrast. But I didn't see that. I didn't work out that this is what I am, and this is how this can dance in separation, in anxiety, in fear, in contrast, in got to do, got to get. You know, we feel like we're a separate being in the world and we need something to feel whole. Well, of course we do. If we're looking out this way, feeling like we're a separate self in the world, we're missing what we are, what we already are. That we're already home. Yeah, we're picking up a thought and leaving. So this coming and going is just this experience. But it feels like, even after awakening, I didn't realize, and all these things dawn on you, it feels like there's 2 positions. There is my ego and there is my true nature. And I jump between the 2. And that is right in a way, but actually there's not 2 positions, because it's only your true nature. It's only what you are that can dance in separation. So there is only one thing, yet it appears as many. And, you know, we are just this one self, yet we can feel that's whole and complete when we're, you know, when we're turned, or when we're like I was in those meetings, you know, drop down in being. You feel whole and complete. You don't have this contrasting, comparing mental activity. You're just at peace and, you know, at rest. Yet when we follow our thoughts, we go up to this idea of a me that when we look in being, we can't find.
Yeah, the me isn't the place to be, is it really?
No.
but that's the scary, that's when, I mean, you know, if you've been searching, it's like that's what you're trying to find, that peace, but the I finds that quite scary, of what would it be like if that wasn't here anymore.
Yeah,
and actually when you have those experiences,
yeah,
but when you have those experiences, it's like, yes, amazing. But it is that kind of that fluctuation. But I guess what you were saying about, you know, what you saw in Muji, it's the one self realizing itself in the other.
Yes, recognizing itself.
Yeah, beautiful.
But I didn't have words for it. I didn't know what it was. It was just a draw. It was just the self recognizing itself.
So how did you know how to drop down into being? So was that prior to going, or was that just from listening to the Muji
their
stuff?
words, it happened. And then I would listen online, it would happen. But I'd always been able to drop into wisdom, and I didn't realize what it was. So I'd have friends who were like, they'd, you know, when you've got 2 decisions, you're like, do I do this or do I do that? And the contrasting, comparing mind is just going to bounce between the two. Can't make a decision. I don't know which way to go. If we're in a little bit of a tiz, obviously if you're quite calm, you might be able to reconcile which one's best. But I'd have friends say, I don't know how to do this. And I'm really confused because it causes a confusion, this bouncing backwards and forwards, with little sort of rest in between. And I would say, well, do you just drop in? We'll just ask the body. And they said, what? I said, well, you just ask the body, don't you? We can just ask the body for the answer. What are you on about? I'm like, well, I just always do this. And it was a sense of centering and dropping and waiting for the answer. Or if they've got two things, I would say, well, is it this one or that one? And I would just get them to do it. I'll say, I'll just show you. We'll do it together. So we center and then we drop and then you ask the question, is it this or that? And there's going to be one that's lighter than the other. There's going to be one that just sort of flowers. And it was just so obvious to me because I'd always done it. I'd always dropped, I'd always centered myself. If there was a bit of a panic, a bit of a scene, it naturally happened. So if I was in an emergency situation, I didn't do it myself. It would just go, boom, and I'd just be really calm and everybody else would be panicking. They go, how are you being so calm? And it wasn't something that, oh, I've got all these tricks. It was like, boom. So I guess I had some of these, like we all do have, but if they're not pointed out, maybe somebody listening to this will recognize it in themselves and go, oh yeah, I know that. That's center. Let me just center. I mean, we have that language. Let me just center myself. Hold on, let me just center myself. It's that it's dropping that mental activity, just. And I think it's quite important to be centered lower in the body. Because when we're in mental activity, it feels like we're up here in our heads. This got to do, got to work it out. Oh, I'm really not sure. Blah, blah, blah. But when we drop down, you can almost hear my voice dropping. And the space, how fast the language was. And now when you're dropped in being, there's more space. And you can dance between the two. It doesn't matter.
So that's interesting what you say about the kind of decision making, because one of the things that I kind of have come across and have found quite difficult at times, depending on whether I'm in my head or not, is the idea that, are we actually making a decision? So, I think in some of the teachings, it's about undoing the doer. So what do you think about that as far as, are we making decisions, or is it just happening and there's the idea that a decision's being made?
You see, with that, I just feel into that now.
Right.
Drop into being for the answer.
Yeah.
I drop into and wait for that knows, because we're all that. We all know. We've all got this knowing. It's what we are when we're centered in being. So for me, I asked that question because it is asked a lot online. And when I asked, it was just, it's not who we think we are that's making the decisions. See, we think we're this separate self. So we're saying, well, who is making the decisions? Am I making the decisions? That's the separate self talking.
Yes.
It's never going to be that one, because that one, in reality, I'm not saying in experience, we can all experience a separate self, but in absolute reality, when we look, that one doesn't exist. Yet it's an experience this has. And I mean this, the self. So this one is not making any decisions.
Yeah.
So I like to call it life, because people have different ideas of, different labels. So life is making the decision, because that's what we are. There's no separate self making the decision. Now, what tends to happen is the mental overlay. Oh, that was a good. Oh, I did well. Oh, because of the language.
It was me that did that.
So even, I've been saying, I didn't know what I was doing. I've been using that language. But eventually, after awakening, and you start to question what's actually here, without the concepts, labels, and ideas about what's here, what is your direct experience that's undeniable? You start to feel that I, you can still say I, but it's this universal I. It's the one self. So when you speak with I And I'm
Right.
not saying that I'm perfect. I'm not saying that I couldn't get identified. I'm not saying that I could get all carried away and all dancing up here. I feel like I'm dancing when I'm, but when you're
Yeah.
playing the role of a separate self, that you don't get carried away and that eye doesn't get a bit sticky. That eye doesn't get a little bit, identified with. But for the majority of the time when we're rested in being, we got to start to see that I almost has a resonance. There's a resonance to it. It's the universal I am. And that space after those words, I am.
And what do you find are the kind of the main areas that bring you into the I still? If like,
Well,
is
it
it
doesn't happen that
relationships?
much, to be absolutely honest,
Yeah,
but it
yeah,
did. I've done this walk home, so I
yeah.
completely understand what you mean because I've done all of that. There was the recognition that that's everyday awareness that we all have is our true nature. That's where we get tangled up because what's looking is your true nature. Of course it is, because it's what we are.
Yeah.
Yet that gets tangled up with the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of this experience of a separate, believed in separate self. So I've just got to come back to your question because I felt like that was quite important to point out that it's everyday awareness, that looking through your eyes is your true nature. Because we're
Yeah.
seeking this way for something else, seeking
Yeah.
outside of ourselves. Where is my true nature? Where is my true nature? True nature seeking.
It's this behind the eyes, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of turning. So sorry, can you repeat the question? Because I've completely
Can't
lost
remember
it.
what it is.
Yeah. Let's feel into it. I can feel
Yeah.
into it. Let's see. Because sometimes it's like a train track. So when I can't find something, I wait and it comes back around like a little train. So you were saying what was the most important, see, I can find
Oh
it
yeah.
somewhere. What was the
Yeah.
most important things for stabilization?
Yeah, like what
Was the
things
coming
can
and
you
going?
find
Oh, and
pulling
what,
you out and
yeah,
stuff like
what
with
pulls us
certain
out?
relationships and
Yes, I think the
the
last thing to go was
identification.
relationships
Yeah.
because there's a lot of well-worn patterns.
Yes.
There's a lot of dancing that we've done before, and that
Can
groove is
relate.
there. And
Yes.
and we've got similar situations that we pick up and chew on, and it could be finances, it could be health, or it could be family, or just habits. And so so all of those things are patterning and shaping of this, but they are born out of the idea that I'm separate. When we're a child, we get invited into separation because a baby, when it's born, it doesn't know, it doesn't identify with its body, potentially doesn't even have a label yet, doesn't have a name. So we're something before we're given a name, before we've identified. So that baby is just pure awareness, unbound, not confined to a physical body. So it's just aware of everything. It's just alert, awake intelligence that then starts to learn, and it's not identified with its body until around, roughly 1.5, 2.5. But that's because everybody keeps teaching. We teach each other, your name, and you keep pointing to the child, so then it adopts this. Oh, so I'm Collette, and I know when I had my awakening. And my awakening isn't quite the right way to phrase it, but it's just language that we have. But when David started to talk about the child, and I'd always recognized this part of me, no matter what age I had a milestone birthday, and I go, people say, "How do you feel?" I'm like, "Well, no different."
Yeah.
I just recognized there was something in me that never changed,
Yes.
and I could see back to moments in my life as a child.
Totally.
It's
Yeah.
the
I get
same
that.
thing all
Yeah.
along. That's not aged. Something
Yeah.
hasn't changed. And I would bring this up and people would just look at me like, no, they didn't get it. And I was like, that part of you that never changes. They're like, no. And I think it's potentially if maybe you're not connected with that inner self that doesn't change, or the idea of us changes, so so David pointed out to me about this child and how there's something that doesn't change. And I was like, yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
And and he said I can't remember his exact words. you know, that's all you've ever been. Maybe that, something like that. That unbound, unlabeled, um, awake awareness that's always been there. That's all we've ever been.
Mm.
All we've ever been. Yet there's been all this dancing of a separate self, thoughts, feelings, emotions, um, roles played out, but we've only ever been the fundamental. So he said something similar to that. And my initial reaction was like, oh, I can't believe my parents called me Collette and I believed them. It was like it was just, oh, I believed I was Collette. This.
Oh, wow.
It got labeled and I believed the label. And then with that label came, oh, she's shy. Oh, she's pretty. Oh, she's the quiet one or the thingy one or the whatever. And then your siblings are called the naughty one and the thingy one. And, you know, and then you adopt roles like, oh, they're naughty. They get told off, right, I'll be the good one. I adopted the good girl role because I saw those two were getting into trouble. I'll just be the good girl. You know, you by your environment, you shape and pattern who you think you are.
Yeah.
And how you behave, but who you actually are. It's sort of, we look this way.
It's like playing a
into the
game, isn't
world.
it? It's like playing
Yeah.
a game, really, like playing playing a part.
Yeah, a role. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Wow.
it's only ever this. That's the thing we
Mm.
miss. It's only ever this
And
that's
did
playing the
you
role.
find, obviously, as you started, you were doing this work and you were finding, more and more of the like awareness or the resting being, did you get kind of times where you got frustrated with the yo-yoing in and out? Was there any frustration with it at all?
Yes, there can be, because we feel like when we're waking up, so there's the recognition of truth,
Mm.
and then there's a forgetting almost, and you're
Yeah.
back in the game. And then you go, oh my goodness, I picked up thoughts. Now, the key thing at that point is to not go back in the game. Why did I pick up thoughts? I'm doing it again. You're back in the
Oh, that's
game.
the one, yeah.
That's the key bit that I point out to people because we've adopted the separate self again straight away. And I always say to people at that point, say to yourself, oh, I'm awake. I'm awake. Claim what's just been seen, that was dancing. You'd woken up from it because as soon as you pick up the thought, damn, I picked up back in the game. You go again. Why did I do that? I'm always doing that. Surely I should know my true nature. I've seen it and seen it and seen it. It's all just more thought that we're believing. And when we believe a thought, we have that experience. That's it. It's so simple, yet not, apparently not so.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's this dancing. You recognize the truth. And I would say a lot of people who have not had any awakening it because they already are their true nature. So when their mind's not dancing, they're seated in the self, as I call it. They're just seated in their true nature. Yet that true nature, if it has the ability to have an experience of separation, never becomes separate, but has an experience. And if we're dominant in mental activity, then that becomes our dominant position. That we're in the thing and we need to organize it, we need to control, and you need to behave because I don't feel good because you're not behaving properly. If you just
Yeah.
also, and love is conditional, if you behave nicely, then I'll love you. And if you don't, then stuff off. There is obviously some unconditional love for children and your animals and
When they're
sometimes your partner
behaving.
and sometimes when they're playing by the rules.
Yeah.
So it's conditional. But you start to realize when we're resting in our true nature, not that we ever leave it, but it's just the language. There's just a universe. We are love. And I recognize what, people say, oh, you need to love yourself. I never really got that because it felt quite egoic. And now I'm like, oh, this is what self-love is, because the self loves itself. That's what I was seeing in Muji. I was like, oh, falling in love with myself. I was like, who's that?
Yeah.
You're seeing the love. You're seeing it. It's not a feeling that's gained by anything. It's what we are. It's
Yeah.
like the perfume of just being who we are. It's
So
just there.
so as the I drops away, that feeling of kind of the what's classed as agape love, would you say that's what kind of what you're feeling more and more of?
And you, like I had a call today, and I've started these little groups of 4 to 6 people, and they're just so beautiful. And it's very easy to just, you see, I have, as soon as they come on, I'm seeing myself, but not
Yeah.
from this egoic thing, like, oh, I'm seeing myself. It's self, it's this unified field.
Mm.
It's this one field, this one self. So you're seeing yourself over and over again. So I just fall in love with everybody. And they start talking, and I'm like slightly mesmerized by them. I'm just,
So it
and they
must
can
is
be,
it the field, it's like the field that Rumi talks about.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll meet you there. That's what I was
Meet
doing
you
with
there,
Muji. I love how
yeah.
it's all got this same theme. I'll meet you there. Yeah.
Mm,
And
beautiful.
you don't really get any of these poems or YouTube videos until you've seen it, and then you're like, oh, they all make sense. They're all saying the same thing, that we are it already.
Yeah.
Yet, if we're looking this way, we're not seeing it because we've got to turn this way. We're looking outside of ourselves because that's where the mind projects to a better feeling moment. There's something I need to get. If I just get that and I just get some more information and something else, then I'll be there. We're just looking in the wrong direction because what this is already whole and complete. Doesn't need anything.
Mm.
Doesn't need to know anything. I mean, can you imagine? Just letting go of that one that needs to work it out.
That is the one, I think, where obviously depending on where I'm at, it's like I can totally feel that things are just happening.
Yeah.
But then when I'm not in that space, I'm
Mm.
like, but I need to be doing this, and what about that, and what's my, I mean, and I'm,
Gentle.
yeah, and I guess as well, it's like as you're undoing, as the mind is undoing, um, a lot of the things that you thought were important or seems to be falling away.
Mm.
And any things around like purpose and did you experience any kind of nihilism and as you were
Not
going
an awful
through
lot.
it? Not
I think
much.
I think because I'd always had that, I was lucky enough to have that wisdom there. I could always check out what that was. So a few times I've had something that was quite flat and I'm like, oh, what's that? What is that? So I don't identify it with, oh, I'm feeling flat. Oh, no, that shouldn't be here. I've self-realized, no, it's like, oh, that's interesting. And I always looked from being at everything because if you dive into the separate self, I'm flat, you're going to be in fear. And then,
Yeah.
so the flatness, I've had a few people come to me with that because what we can get slightly stuck in there's nobody here, there's nothing to do, there's nobody doing it. And we're
Yeah.
almost slightly stuck in that, that loop of, you frame yourself as that then because
Mm.
we like to frame things. So, oh, I'm the separate self and I need to get rid of it. Oh, I've awakened. Oh, no, I've lost it. Oh, we frame it and that becomes our dominant thing that we're looking at. We're centered on that. So if we've
Mm.
got this, so there's nothing here, there's nothing to do, nobody's doing it. If we keep doing that, then we're slightly framing ourselves. We're slightly contracting around that identity. And then that I
Mm.
would imagine that can get quite the joy and the bliss isn't there.
Yeah.
So what I've done in the past, so I was lucky enough to reach this place where, so I was, you start to recognize you're not that, and then, well, actually, what am I then? What is this? So it's that exploring of what actually is this. And I felt like I just did this folding in and this folding in because we're used to going out, 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 and it was just this folding in that happened. And the mind will label this as, well, there's nothing there. So it's to drop that mental activity and look at what's actually here. And we're not used to something that's untangible. We're used to form, to get our
Mm.
teeth in and label. So it's getting used to not labeling something and just feeling it, just directly experiencing what we are, even just like the word presence. What even is that? Without then labeling what we think it is, a spiritual label. What even is presence? So it's this introspective thing. And I reached a point, and I think I did a video on it, pure potential or something. I recognized, I was like, oh, what's that? And it was like, I just recognized there's sort of an edge. of nothing becoming everything. So I was lucky enough that I did experience absolute reality, which could be labeled nothing. It's when the mind, everything stops, the looker dissolves, and we could do a little bit of that later. And you just go to, everything dissipates and there's nothing you could label. There's no thoughts. It's just nothing. And so I could see that from that nothing is almost as if you can turn towards everything, and there's an edge. And it's like you get to this edge where behind you is nothing and in front of you is everything, but you're not quite either. You're there. But what's so delicious about that edge is that you're pure potential. You're like the seed about to burst. It's like this. It's just on the edge. It's like, it's not quite either. And it's such a, it's such an it's life, so it's hard to describe, but it's that pure potential. So it's so full, but not of any particular thing. It's just the potential of it is full. So I tend to take people from, because they're looking at the no thing, saying, well, there's nothing here. What am I supposed to do? I feel quite flat. And the two particular people, I've managed to get them to turn, and they're on that. They're like, it's an edge. And I'm like, yes, it's an edge. And there's like, oh my goodness, there's everything. There's all of this that's born out of the no thing. All of this has so much potential. Vast. Like it makes galaxies, and how much potential is there?
So when you talk about that edge, then are you saying that once you're on the edge, that there's this kind of creative force where you're just going to potentially just do something? You're going to just create.
Can just feel it. It's just exploring what's here. So then I don't mentalize it as if I'm going to do something. What shall I do with this? It's just an exploration of what's actually here so feeling into what's here. So there's all that potential. And I think the Buddhism, they call it no thing appearing as everything, or I know Adyashanti talks about emptiness dancing. You start to see all those, you start to understand them now, because there's no thing or emptiness appearing as everything, because when you look this way, there is just unmanifested. Yet as it turns, you become the just prior to manifestation, that edge. I think I've heard a term by Abraham Hicks. I think she calls it the leading edge, and that seems to, a pure potential. Just this, you're on the leading edge. That's very much what it feels like. Like now I'm really energized just talking about it. I'm like, whereas before I was very much in being and rested down, and it's just how this can dance.
So would you say that's kind of like the inspiration will drop in those spaces? Is it about inspiration at all, or?
There is inspiration, yeah, that can happen. I can't really break it down to any. This happens, then that happens, and that happens. I think it's just spontaneous.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it's from the no thing. There's a spontaneous movement. So, so like today, I wrote something. I heard one line. I think I put on a YouTube video, and this guy just said one line and just stopped, and I knew to switch the video off, and I just quickly wrote something. Just because there was an inspiration to write, to see how I could put these pointers in a little, things I often say when I'm leading people into being. I could see that a lot of those things, that one word that he said, I could expand on and play with. So yeah, that seems to be, and of course there's nobody doing it. It's just all spontaneous. There can be there's a sense that I can say, oh, I did it, yeah, but I can also see there's no I claiming it. There's no I that's clever. There's no I that's got this great talent or any better than anybody else, because we're all the same thing. Yes, we can shape and pattern differently, but the source of it all is exactly the same. So there's no hierarchy.
Yeah. I mean, I know you spoke when I've watched some of your stuff before about the Byron Katie work that you did.
Yeah.
why is that so important to kind of start looking at kind of the way you're perceiving the world and sort of turning it around? And why would you say that's such a big part of it?
Well, I think that can help anybody, even if they don't want to self-realize,
Yeah.
even if that isn't in their, thoughts, because it helps people who are suffering as this separate self-identity. And I did that, that my thoughts were, I could recognize that my thoughts were causing the suffering. And I think probably because Eckhart had pointed that out to me, you're the awareness of the thoughts, not the thinker of thoughts. And I was like, hang on a minute. I thought
Mm.
I was the thinker. Oh, yes, I am aware of the thoughts just coming. Well, that's interesting. So he's like, if you're aware of your thoughts, you can't be the thoughts. Oh, so there's some distance there. And then you start to recognize that it's thoughts are causing the suffering. So the situation is a situation, whatever it is. It's the thoughts about the situation that actually cause the suffering. So, there's a classic line of what's wrong with this moment if you don't think about it?
Mm.
There's nothing. Thoughts drop. There's nothing wrong with the moment. Yet we can pick up. Yes, but to know it's terrible. It should be, they shouldn't be doing that. Those political people dance, they're so mean
Mm.
and they're so. Or you can just drop it. And when you drop it, you've got chance to be in wisdom and unity. You've got chance to see that that person that you could have been annoyed at is just picking up their thoughts and believing them and acting them out. And you get a chance to see they are fundamentally the same source energy that's
Mm.
shaping and patterning this expression. So you see the root of everything.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that you're going to, you still then you approach life from more of a place of wisdom. So you don't then allow people to do things to you, not wash over. You respond instead of reacting. You don't join them in the pain. Yes, you
Mm.
don't add more suffering to the world. You don't attack other people. You just say, it's a point of view. That's what I've had all week and all last week. Points of view. It's all just points of view.
Mm.
In their eyes, that's right, because that's their point of view. So in fact, they are right in that moment for them from that point of view. So
Mm.
it just gives you more space around seeing this. Everybody's believing their thoughts and dancing, and there's no right or wrong in a way. And I know that's really hard to hear when you're in that world of duality of right and wrong.
Mm. Yeah.
So
So when obviously one of the things that when I've spoken to people about thoughts and they're not your thoughts, like that seems to be a really tough one for people to
yeah,
grasp. Like, what do you
yeah,
mean they're not my thoughts? How can they not be my thoughts? I'm thinking
yeah,
about this and that, which are mine. Like, so
yeah.
how do you kind of describe that? Because one of the ways that I was taught in the beginning was around looking at thoughts like it's a software program, like being
Oh,
dropped in, which was
mm,
really useful for me. But I
mm,
think, I think some people just really struggle with the idea that they're not your thoughts.
mm,
So
mm.
how do you teach that?
I'm just going to sit here and think about, well, drop into being. I mean, I did it today with somebody. I was trying to find, everything's fresh, so I don't have a method. Obviously, there's some things that do work, so they do seem to come up over and over again.
Mm.
But okay, this is what I do. So what I tend to do is take people to being.
Mm.
So I talk about dropping out of the head. I talk about opening the focus. Because if we're narrowed down in thought, well, yes, no, in my thoughts, of course they are. We're looking in a narrowed view. So I say, we just open the focus as if you've got peripheral vision. Immediately there's some softening
Mm.
felt. And then I ask them to just rest back in the body. Can you just rest back as if you've done a long journey home and you're in the car? You switch the engine off and there's that, I'm home, that feeling of arrived. And there's a moment before you pick all your stuff up that you're just being, and you're just, So I point people to that. So we rest back in the body instead of this forward grasping, got to get, got to get. We've got an open focus and we're resting back in the body. And then we feel like we're located in the head and we can just drop down, down, down into being.
Mm.
And what I tend to point to is the contact points of the body in the chair and the feet on the ground. And to feel into those contact points, not to think about them or label them. So we're going to direct experience of just being with what's here, rather than labeling mental activity about what's here. So I spend quite a long time, and I tend to be able to see where somebody is in their body. Because what we tend to do is jump up to try and work it out. So we're in being, we're exploring being, then we might get to a space I talk about the body. And so now they've got some chance to see when a thought arises, they see it because there's some distance.
Yeah.
Because they're in being, and then a thought arises, and there's, oh, so the thoughts are appearing in this space, not in my head. Oh, because they've got distance enough to see it. And I think the Byron Katie thing did that for me as well. It created distance because the thoughts settled down. So as we're dropped in being and we're feeling into the contact points, you've all sort of unplugged from mental activity. And then we explore the body. There's an area inside of the body and an area outside. I'm going through it a lot quicker than normal. And then I get people to see that can they find the area where the inside and the outside meet without labeling or believed in patterns. Most people can't actually find the area where the inside and the outside meet. So it gives us a chance to see our formless awareness isn't confined to the physical body. Yes, it experiences a physical body. We're not ignoring it, just like we're not ignoring thoughts. But what's the bigger picture? Is it all appearing in what we are? Are we actually formless awareness? And the body mind is an experience within formless awareness that we don't ever become, but we can experience. And the thoughts are appearing in. Thoughts, feelings, emotions, sounds are all appearing. Nobody's thinking them. They're just appearing. They're spontaneously appearing. And a thought can be given equal. We can see that they're both equal. A thought and a sound are equal until we start going, well, now that's my thought and that's a bird. And also you can point out mental activity. It can be a sound of a bird. There's an awareness of the sound of a bird or the breeze on my face. That's just direct experience and just a speaking about what's actual. And then there's a sound of a bird. Oh, it's that bird. Oh God, it's those pigeons. They come every morning. They drive me nuts. I wish they weren't here. It's now mental activity. It's not actual. They're not here in the morning. There was a sound of a bird, but now we've created a story and it shouldn't be here. And I don't like it. We've got good and bad. We've got an opinion. We've got a contraction, and we need it to be another way. And that's
based on the past as well, isn't it? It's based on past rather than just every moment fresh.
Yeah, they drive me mad when they come in the morning. It's a little story about me. So we're not saying they didn't come and it wasn't there was a mental commentary about it, but we seem to then drag it to now. It's not here. I think that's another thing to point out, that there is only just this moment, constantly refreshing itself. And the past and future is only here if we create it.
And that's the thing with relationships and with people, when deciding that somebody's a certain way and keeping people in patterns.
Yeah.
Because we're keeping them
responding to the pattern, not the person.
Yeah.
And then our
the past
pattern
everywhere. Yeah.
We're responding from our patterns. So they're saying something and we take it to be completely different.
Yeah.
Can you switch the whatever off? You think, oh, who's bossing me around? Or, we've applied something else to, they're just asking you to switch something off.
Yeah.
Or like, your partner comes in a mood. Oh, they're angry at me. Come in angry. Oh, they're angry at me. We start making it about ourselves. No, they're just angry. Now we have a choice. We can remain neutral. It's a really good one just to remain neutral. Okay, that's interesting. They're in a bit of a mood. That is pretty much it. Unless we go to, God, they're always in a mood. It drives me mad.
I knew they were going to be in a mood.
Yeah, I knew it. It's always this. Yeah, they always come in and ruin my peace. Well, no, you're ruining your peace, really, aren't you? But by all the thoughts and feelings, they're just in a mood. You can leave them with the mood, and if you don't rise up in your, as Eckhart would call it, pain body, they come in with a pain body looking for fuel, looking for somebody to have a go at, or looking for this interaction. And it can be on lighter levels as well. And if we don't rise up as that, they've got nothing to feed. So it tends to just drop and they'll go away and then they come back. But if we're still chewing on how they came in all angry. And they shouldn't be like that. They've come in okay now, but we're still chewing on it. And then they say something quite innocent like, oh God, I was in such a mood. And you're still ready to, they've got rid of it and you're still ready to kill them. Because they've now put you in a mood.
And it's their fault.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous,
And it's
isn't it?
justifiable. The thing is, it's justifiable from the separate self that feels like that's done it, that's believing these thoughts. For the separate self, in reality, no. Somebody came in a mood. That was it. Now they're not in a mood. That's it.
So do you think with this work, let's say, you know, I mean, lots of people have, you know, been searching for many years and maybe looked at different spiritual texts and, like you say, you know, looking outside. Would you say with this work, even if somebody's not really been doing too much seeking, would you say that they can have pretty fast results?
If they're open to it, yeah. Like I was talking to my hairdresser yesterday, and she said, oh, how are you getting on? How are your calls? You know, I just talk about calls because she asked what I do, and I'm like, oh, I do these calls.
How do you explain that?
Yeah. So I just say calls, and I talk about presence because people can sort of get the idea of presence. And so she asked a few questions, and I was like, well, she's really absorbing all of this. She said, yeah, I really get it. I absolutely get it. She was just lapping it all up.
Wow.
And I wasn't trying to. She just kept asking more and questions. But what was very interesting, we were discussing various things. And at one point, there was a really interesting moment. She started to speak, and everything fell away from me. And I was literally, it's hard to describe, like listening. There was something very special to what she was saying. And it's like she was talking from the wisdom body. And it was like I was just there with her. And she was giving me advice. And she wasn't clocking she was doing it because it wasn't coming from the me. Oh, I know, I'm going to tell you. I was like, oh, look at that. It was as if the whole of the salon just disappeared. There was just this moment. And I was literally and I could tell it was different. You know, you notice these things, so they're different to how life normally unfolds. And I was just there on every single word she said. And it was some very, very quite neutral advice. And I was like, that's the second person that's given me a very similar piece of advice. And so, yeah, so these moments are interesting. So you were asking, you know, so I think anybody, you know, she was very open. She said, I get everything you say. I'm getting it. It's just all, she kept saying, it just all makes sense. It just all makes sense. And she might have just been very open to it, but she definitely wasn't a spiritual seeker. I mean, she didn't know who Eckhart was, but she knew presence. She got the idea of what that meant to be present, you know, needing to be more present. But I never really, I never push it on anybody. I don't really share it that much.
How did it affect like your relationships, like with your children and your husband, and was there any kind of resistance from them? Like, did they notice the shift?
Yes, I think my boys did. So it was a couple of years ago now. We went straight on holiday after self-realization. And like we had like a 6-hour journey in the car, and I was just blissed out. It didn't matter if we were in traffic. They were all moaning, you know, oh, traffic. I was just like, yeah.
This is amazing. Look at all the traffic.
Yeah. And then we had to, you know, and you get to Cornwall, it's 6.5 hours in the car, and then you've got to undo. I'm just in bliss, unpacking, doing it all.
Wow.
It's all just happening. And they're used to, at that age, they're, you know, 20 and maybe 18 or whatever they were, having a go at mum. Let's see how many buttons we can press.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't press my buttons. And they were rattled by that. They kept going and kept going to the point where they were running at me and physically shaking me because they just didn't know what to do anymore.
Where's mum?
Yeah, I mean, I was there, obviously, and I just didn't respond to the bait, you know, that they'd say, I don't know, you know, we're going to go out and get really drunk tonight. They're waiting for me to say, what do you mean you're going to get drunk? You know, they just throw anything. They just keep throwing stuff at me to see if I'll react. And I just didn't. I mean, I'm not saying it, the whole 2 years I didn't react. And they think it's hilarious if I do, because they're like, oh, so spiritual now, are we?
Well, dig.
Who's suffering now? I love that. I love to say that in the beginning, because obviously in the beginning you do go backwards and forwards.
Of course, yeah.
So there was quite a long period of bliss, maybe 6 months. And then there was the picking up, and I could see the backwards and forwards. And I went in a group of 20 people who'd all self-realized through David Bingham, and we're all doing the same. But because I was new, they were all swinging and I was pretty much in bliss, but watching it. And they were talking about the swinging, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I noticed that, you know, you can feel like you've completely lost. I always knew not to pick up the thought, oh, it's gone. I just knew that that was not an option for me. I'm like, no, I'm not.
I'll
I've
remember
seen
that
it.
one.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
I saw that moment of, I can't believe they called this Collette. And I knew that was my true nature. And I knew that was all what was always there. And that this was just, you know, something that we can identify with. So I knew that, but there still did feel like there was two positions for me. You know, I'm lost in the game. Oh, I'm awake. I'm lost in the game. I'm awake, and that goes backwards and forwards, and most people do that. And I remember the moment that I recognized I don't move, I was like, oh, I don't go backwards and forwards. Oh my goodness. Oh.
Wow.
And then there'd been these stepping stones, a little bit like I use, you know, you open your focus, rest back in the body. It's all these stepping stones that I was using that I could see. Oh, so all that journey home, the backwards and forwards, was for no one. Because there is only your true nature. This dance is just true nature dancing. There is nowhere to go. I was like, where was I going? You feel into that. Where would you be going? You know, you've got this feeling. You mentioned that you're going backwards and forwards. Where are you going? And also, who's going? Who is it that's going backwards and forwards? There is only this. It can't go anywhere. There's nowhere to go. And it was as if all the stepping stones I'd used, the barricade, all very valid for the separate self. But when you've seen that that separate self doesn't exist yet, you keep picking it up. All the stepping stones dropped, and I just couldn't ever believe in the separate self. I'm not saying that you cannot get a little bit identified, that I can have some stickiness somehow. But I can't really remember the last time that there was any identification with it. But I'm not going to say the potential is definitely there, because you've still got these patterns that are running. It just feels like they're 5 rooms away now. They're in the background. You know, they're just, and if anything is presented comes a bit sticky, you're just like, well, who are they coming for? Have you ever asked yourself that? I remember asking myself, hang on a minute, these invitations that I'm picking, who's picking up the invitations? Who is actually picking them up? Can't find anybody.
Yeah.
So it's just how your true nature can dance. There's no picking up.
Amazing.
There's nobody picking them up. There's no actual person picking them up. And that can help to drop that idea, well, oh, I pick up my invitations and then I wake up. Well, who is? There is no I in reality that's picking them up. There is an experience of an I, but the I doesn't actually exist. You know, it's like air over here, this idea of a me that, so why would I ever be entertained? Who? I can't find the one that would be picking them up. So it just doesn't seem, it seems pointless to pick them up. Like they're not valid anymore. I see them dance. I do see them dance, and it's just a bit of a laugh, really. But they do, you know, that's not to negate anybody's experience of picking them up, because I did it. I know that it feels very real and it's frustrating. But that frustration is, you know, that the idea of it needing to be any other way. And that one doesn't actually exist. It's just a contraction, just an experience we can have that gets identified as a separate self, but it's not, doesn't exist. Can't find it when we look.
So, I mean, if you could give kind of one piece of advice to someone in the midst of like an awakening, you know, what would that be? Would it be to work with somebody like you to kind of
I
really
guess it
speed
depends
things
on,
up, or
I mean, I feel like everybody's journey is their journey.
mm,
Um, so again, I'm just opening up, just looking at, I think it's just to just let people know that they are the authority. Don't give all your authority away to other people.
mm,
I think that they know better than you, because we are this one field of knowing in reality, in absolute reality. So maybe see if there's some steps that you can take to recognize that this wisdom that we all have. Maybe they're just listening to this, they recognize that they've done that centering before. I'm not going to be, unique in that. So can they access their own wisdom? I should be saying, oh yeah, come to me, but that's not my driving force.
yeah,
I'd rather empower people to look for themselves. Then if they want to chat about it once they're found it, great. Also I'm happy to, I'm just happy, whatever. But yeah, I'm just happy. I'm
just happy,
sorry.
great.
Sorry to tell
I'll
you
have
that,
some
but
of
I'm just
that.
happy all the day. So let's just feel into if there's anything else. I got two, upon awakening, I got two things that said, there's no agenda. Your true nature doesn't have an agenda. I guess that's what I'm grasping at here. There's no agenda here. So it's hard for me to say, yes, you need to come on modify. You need to do a one-to-one with me. There's no
Yeah.
agenda here, really. So no agenda is a good one, because you know that the separate self, if this is an agenda in anything you're doing, the separate self idea of that's operating in lack, even if it's like writing a course or offering somebody something, if there's an agenda in it, maybe just backtrack and have a look at what's actually here. Because when there's an agenda, we're limiting that pure potential that we are. We're starting to limit it. And then, just let go of needing to know anything. That was another thing I got after awakening. I know absolutely nothing. And being okay with knowing nothing. Because that I is the one that's just going to take you on lots of cul-de-sacs trying to work it out. And the mind, that mental activity is appearing in what we are. So it's not going to see its true nature, because it's a contrasting comparing tool. So the mind is not going to work it out. That's the biggest thing I could offer. You won't work it out with the mind. The mind is going to want to label something and say, I've got it, I've found my true nature. So it's going to send you on a big long search for something. And it's not a thing, because it's not in the world of subject object. And that's where the mind is. So if you can get that the mind is not going to get it, your best thing is to surrender to what's already here and say, I know absolutely nothing. And be okay not knowing. Be absolutely okay not knowing. So it's like a surrendering of needing to know, and being okay with not needing to know. And in that, there's these just like levels of surrendering to what you are. There's not a person surrendering, there's a feeling of surrendering. But what you are is already naturally surrendered. So it's as if you're dying to yourself. You're surrendering to what you already are. That's probably the best advice I could give, really.
Gorgeous. Well, thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you
you're
for
very
all
welcome.
of
I'm not sure
that.
whether I did actually answer your questions. There was something I
No, it
kept
was
thinking, I didn't
great.
answer that question. Oh, well. I think it
Oh,
was this backwards and forwards you were asking about.
yeah.
Do you still get drawn in? And I
Mm,
did. I did get drawn in. I did get drawn into, in relationships. That was the last thing to go.
yeah.
I watched a squeeze. There used to be a squeeze. Certain conversations were had. And you start to realize this, you're a bit like the thoughts, you're the awareness of the squeeze. So the squeeze, because I could see it, I just watched it. I didn't need it to change. No eye rose up that needed that to be any different. And when you don't need it to change, you're just aware of it and you're just noticing it. It has a chance to dissipate. So every time it squeezed, it was a bit less and a bit less. Then one day it just never squeezed around that particular topic with that person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting the way it's like temptation, isn't it? It's like there's a temptation especially like with old patterns and old stories,
The
to
habits,
say,
pick it up.
because it is a temptation, especially when it's been a thing,
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that? It's
So
a pull.
yeah,
There is a
yeah,
pull. There's a tangible pull, a tangible invitation that's pulling you in.
yeah,
Uh, Not that the you that you think you are, to it's because this, feel into this can adopt that. So that's what that pull is. It's a pattern that this has been doing.
mm,
What you are has been picking up and operating as a separate self experience, only ever experience. So it's a well-worn pattern.
yeah,
And there is a point when something's offered up, such an interesting point, and you don't pick it up. You can't believe how easy it was to not choose the pattern.
mm,
But there does seem to be some determination,
yeah,
some divine will to not
yeah,
keep picking up the patterns. How sick are you of playing that game that you've played
yeah,
20 years with your mum? That's what I was like. So
mm,
I'll tell you very quickly, if you don't mind.
yeah,
There
go
was
for
this
it.
pattern that my mum used to say to me, she'd say, "Oh, you cook. You're better than me. You cook." So I'm in her, I'm like, "Okay, I'll cook." I start cooking, and then she comes in, "You're not doing it like that, are you?" So I used to say, "Well, yeah, because you said cook." So I've entered the conversation.
Yes,
So I was I,
defense,
I
the
was doing the
defense.
thing. Yeah, I was doing the ring, and she came in and she said, you're not cooking it on the oven, are you? Oh, you're not using the hob, are you?" And I said, "Yes." I can't believe how easy it was. There was a moment where I could have engaged with, "Well, yeah, because that."
Yeah, yeah,
And I just went, "Yes."
because it's the character that wants to defend itself
Wants to
and
have a
takes it
position.
personally.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I
ow,
just
you're attacking me again, for God's sake. And it's
the
like, you
freedom.
don't need, yeah, just, yeah, that's
Don't
what I'm
need to
doing.
entertain the dance. You don't have no need to dance with them. So I just said
Yeah.
yes. And she literally shook her head because she was ready for this backwards and forwards of, "Well, you do it then." "No, no, 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 it's fine. You do it." All of this that we used to play.
Yeah.
I just said yes and carried on stirring. She went, "Oh, okay then." And she
Yeah.
sort of shook her head and walked off. She said, "I don't know what I was thinking. I was going to say something." It's because what she got all planned out,
Yeah.
only not no fault of hers. It's just this dance that we've been doing fell away, and she didn't. She was like, "Oh, I don't know what I was going to say." Anyway, I'll leave you to it, darling. And off she went.
Yeah, it's amazing because when you don't join in the dance,
Yeah,
the dance
stops.
stops.
Yeah,
And
there's no
it
fueling
is
it.
amazing. It's
Yeah,
amazing because I guess it's like you're not colluding with
you're
that
not
part of the
playing that.
mind.
It
You're
is
not
an
playing the
energetic
game.
game.
Yeah.
It's an energetic game, which
Yeah.
again, David Bingham says that. And he said
Yeah.
that, and I didn't see it till you see it. He said it,
Yeah.
and I was like, he says, these invitations are being, there, it's like an algorithm, and they're coming, they've got, because of this pattern,
Mm.
because they're the experiences. Because once you've picked up a thought, then you have that experience like, "Oh, I've lost my true nature." If you believe it, you sign for it, you take delivery, you adopt the self that's lost it, then you're off in the world going, "Well, how come I lost it? I really saw it before, and that's annoying." You're now having an experience of having lost it.
Mm.
Tends to be what happens. So that builds on, it feeds, it energizes this idea of a me that has a potential to lose it, pick it up and lose it. So it's literally your thoughts that
Yeah.
create experience. It's so interesting when you see
And
it.
then you're in. It's like you're in then.
You're the character, you're playing the game.
Yeah.
It's very true. And that's why when somebody else is in there, it's okay. I say to
Yeah.
them, "Yes, I completely understand. You did, there was that experience." And never deny anybody's experience because that was what was experienced. But
Yeah.
who experienced it?
It's so funny because I had similar things with, well, quite a few different relationships, but the one with my daughter was, I mean, it was so interesting for a while because she couldn't stand the fact that I wasn't joining in on
Yeah,
certain things.
yeah.
And I remember, remember her saying to me at one point, "I just want my mum back."
Oh, bless her.
And at
Oh,
the time I was like, "Oh my God," because I was really trying not to collude,
yeah,
and it was effort at first, but I was really steadfast with it. And now it's like massively shifted, like
yeah.
everything, it's helped her, but at
Yes,
the
because
time
you're not
it's,
fueling it.
yeah,
Yeah,
but at the time it was quite uncomfortable to come out of the expectation of what that person and what these people want
the
you to
role,
be. Yeah.
the role that you've been
Yeah.
playing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because it was so patterned and grooved, and it was the dance that everybody was used to doing.
Yeah.
And then you're not doing it, so they're like, hang on a minute.
Yeah. Come
Hang on a minute.
back.
Yeah. It is. I just found everything so interesting now.
Yeah.
So interesting. And I think the joy is that I've recognized that there's this place that's completely untouched by the dance. Absolutely untouched. And I've had lots of things happen, loads of things happen. So let's just make it very clear. It doesn't mean your life gets better.
Yeah.
This world of duality doesn't get any better. It just means, well, not at this point for me anyway. But what happens is, no matter what happens, there is a place that's untouched, and that's the freedom.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't had all of those ups and downs, all of those things happen, I wouldn't have recognized that place. People
Yeah.
could say, well, it's all right for you. Your life's all nice. It's like, oh, there's a roller coaster going on out there. Because it's always going to be the world of duality. It's always going to be up and down.
Yeah. You can't
Always going
fix
to
it
be
in the
ever changing.
external.
No.
You can't fix it in the external. It's
So
just in the
then,
mind. Yeah.
So then does it, and I can't tell you this yet, does it once we recognize we're untouched and then we don't fuel the ever changing, we don't fuel those patterns of lack or whatever, however it dances, does it sort itself out? I don't know. I haven't got there yet.
Yeah.
But there's some
definitely seen-
inclination that because we're not fueling those patterns,
Yeah.
that potentially it does.
I've definitely seen people shift, like, in my experience of where
Yeah.
I'm at, and really
Oh,
seeing,
that
like,
they
my
respond.
yeah, and like my view of what they were like. And because I've undone a lot of that and looked at my projections and stuff,
Yeah.
just seeing total shifts in people, like, because I'm not holding them in that pattern anymore.
Yeah. You've got to be completely honest though.
Yeah.
You've got to want to die that idea
Yes.
of me
Yeah.
to die. And it sounds awful to the mind. It isn't horrible. It's actually beautiful.
Yeah.
Because you're letting go of all that contraction and all that idea of a me, that position, that posturing, that I need it to be this way. You're letting, and it's just utter freedom then when you let go of it.
And needing to be
Die,
right.
It's a beautiful death.
Yeah. Not needing to be right.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Yeah. There's freedom in that, isn't there?
Huge.
To allow people to be who they are.
Mm.
Allow them to be annoyed. Okay, yeah, that's, you learn that people just want to be who they are. And we constantly trying to get them to be who we think, we'd need them to be. But when you recognize you're okay, however people are shaping, not that you put yourself in danger or anything like that, you're just free. Completely free. You just recognize your unbound true nature. It's delicious.
Yeah.
But there is a bit of a journey for no one.
A bit of graft. So these groups that you hold, are they in contact with you, and is it something that you can just join, or
so I do different things. I tend to work with people who I've had a one-to-one with mostly because I know them, so I know what group to put them in, how to place them. So at present, I've done all different sorts of things. I'm just still finding what works, what flows. And this new thing that I've been doing, creating these little groups, because people have always asked after a one-to-one, they may have had some good results, or they've even awoken. I've had, even from the beginning, people were waking up on one call, and I was like, oh. Wow. And I would say there was some agenda there as well. I felt like I needed to save people, but it was still working. And it's not because I was good, it's because they were just ripe. They were just ready for it, like I was when it popped for me. So no matter what, people do wake up. So after that, they'd always say, well, what do I do now? Because obviously it's fairly expensive to have one-to-ones constantly. And I didn't really know what to do with them. So I just kept saying, well, when I've created, they wanted a community, and I didn't really know how to structure that. So in the past, I've done big groups. I think you joined my 4-week one, and that felt like there was just stuff I needed to get out on paper, the 4 steps of sort of how I did it. And I ran 2 of those, and that felt great. but it's almost like I'm not sure I'm going to ever do one of those again. It's gone.
Right.
Whether
Yeah.
it comes back and whether I use it, I don't know. So what seems to have happened now, I had somebody say, can I share one-to-ones with other people, 2 or 3 people? And I was like, oh, actually, that's quite a good idea. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to manage it because I've got people in Dubai and India and all different time zones, but leave it with me and I'll see what happens. And then just recently there was this, I just thought, oh, why don't I do a survey? Honestly, I didn't think this up. The individual, I didn't come up with this idea. It just sprung up to do a survey. So I'll give them times and they can fill it in, and we'll just see what we get. See if we get enough groups, 4 to 6 people, and then they can share the cost of a one-to-one. So that was the idea. And then luckily there was this plus on the survey that I created, and it was a spreadsheet and it put all the information all the time. It rearranged everybody. I was like, how on earth did I manage to do that? So I've got 6 groups at the moment of 4 to 6 people, and I'm on my 2nd week with them all. It's magic. It's not the Collette show. It's not all about me. It's about them. It's the unified feel. It's even on this 2nd week, it's changed, that it's so intimate and so delicious to be with everybody. And the groups I have got, amazingly, I've got a group of 4 who really don't know what they're doing, and I don't mean that in a not very nice way. I mean it they're still really unsure. So there's this backwards and forwards, and I don't get it. There's that frustration. And they're all in one group, and I didn't make them in one group,
Yeah.
because some of them I've only seen once, and it might have been 18 months ago. So I can't remember absolutely where everybody was when they came, but they've all worked out beautifully. I'm really enjoying this. So this could be the way forward for me, but I do like to see people first to get a feel, because I don't like to put somebody who's really suffering into a group where everybody's in quite that even place, because I think that's quite cruel. Because it can get very much, the mind is going to judge, well, they've got it and I haven't, and that's not fair. And why
there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that having some of that is helpful, because they're more in a unified field, although we're all in it. But their attention, their focus is in that unified field. So that can help somebody who's suffering to see that. But it seems as if, so you might want to cut all of that out. But what I do like to do is get a handle on where somebody is and able to have, and I did think today, I wonder if I could do 20 minutes with people, just so if this is something I'm going to go on and create these small groups, keep going on with them, whether I can do like a 20-minute little interview to try and work out, just to I like to get to know somebody before I put them in a group. I like to have that.
Yeah.
And maybe get some of the fundamentals just ticked off that we can have a little look at together. So I'm not going over the same material, so we can, so I don't know really. I mean, people
It'll
are
unfold,
welcome
I'm
to
sure.
reach out by email, and it'll all just happen.
Yeah. Oh, well, beautiful. Thank you so much for coming along. It's been a lovely chat. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. And I wanted to say that I saw your Grace Moving, I think you called it, or something.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful to watch. Yeah, because I did
Yeah.
have a Kundalini awakening a long time ago.
Right.
And so I recognize those movements.
Yeah, it feels really lovely, and it happens when I meditate and stuff as well. And
so have you had a Kundalini awakening?
well, I think, I mean, I had an experience about 2016 where I was I woke up one morning and I was just having all these jolts.
Yeah.
And I went to hospital because I was like, what is, like, literally was like this.
Interesting what they said.
Well, as soon as the doctor came, I'd been waiting for about 3 hours. As soon as the doctor came, it stopped. I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, that night, because I was a bit freaked out by it, I was like, what is going on here? That night, I went to bed and I woke up in the middle of the night and I'd cut all my head. And I went and looked in the mirror and I'd cut my lip. I was like,
you've been spontaneously moving in your sleep.
I was like, what is going on here? Then when I got back into bed, I've never had a seizure before. And all I know is something happened where I felt like I was having a seizure. It was like being trapped in my own head. And I was thinking, I'm having a stroke, I'm dying or whatever. And then when I came out of it, I couldn't speak. So my daughter called the ambulance and they took me down and did a load of scans and they couldn't find anything. So I was like, what is
I would
going
say
on with
that's
this?
Kundalini awakening. Yeah.
So then after that, I remember being in a lot of stress because I couldn't work out what it was. I was terrified of having another one.
So the mental activity is running.
Oh yeah, I was right in there. And then I think I'd been trying to meditate, and I remember this particular morning, and it must have been what you class as an on your knees, I've had enough of this, you better help me out kind of moment.
Yeah, surrendering.
And I was like, God, help me,
Well,
what is going on? And in that moment, my body started to move.
yeah, it was able to move.
And I was like, what? And I just remember crying, going, oh, there is more. There's definitely more. And then over time, it just evolved. I mean, it was there was
Beautiful. It's lovely to watch.
some really
Yeah,
weird stuff going on
it
for a
can be a bit
while.
weird. Yeah. So
It
mine
does
was.
when you don't know what's going on. Yeah.
Yes.
So
So I had
it's
years of not
interesting.
knowing really what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd be like at points where my head would be stuck.
And your jaw's open and it's cracking, and your bones are cracking, and maybe this is another conversation for us.
Yeah.
I mean, you might want to cut it out of this one, and we can do it. But I
was like, no, we're not bothering. We'll leave that one out. We won't bother.
Because I went to see a cranial sacrotherapist, and he'd been to India and been healed by Sai Baba because he had crippling arthritis, and he was actually a convict. He was out of prison, and somebody just told me about him because I had really bad period pains to the point where I was having morphine injections that were so bad.
Wow.
And so I went to see him. And when he was treating me with cranial sacrotherapy, so holding onto your head, I just started to spontaneously move. My shoulders, I just went. And he said, oh, that's interesting. And then I went crack. And then I sat up on the couch and cracked and back down again. And I could see, but I think because I had the wisdom in place, I could see it was okay. And also I had him. So he just said, oh, we've opened a can of worms here. I'm going to leave you. I'll come back in a bit. And I just was off doing, like you were doing those movements. And I was doing sort of yoga, but on the couch. I was doing all sorts of things, cracking my bones, energy shooting out my head, shooting out my feet, crack, 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 crack. It's not cracking bones, but it's that popping you get when you go to a chiropractor. And then I could just do it spontaneously, but I didn't really know what it was. There was no internet to look it up because it was a long time ago before I'd had children. So 25 years ago, maybe longer. And my husband was like, did he hypnotize you? What did he do to you? And I actually went to my husband and tapped him on the forehead and he could do it. And I think they call it Shaktipat, that you can share it with others, but I've never shared it. It did spontaneously with him, but there's something sacred about it. I don't feel qualified to be going around tapping people and leaving them with it, because it can be, like he said, we've opened a can of worms. It can be quite violent. It can be quite,
if they don't really want it.
Yeah.
But you'll make an excellent chiropractor.
Yeah.
If you need a new career.
Look what you did to me. My head spins each night. But what I recognized was if I relaxed, it stopped. If I just said, no,
you can make it stop.
No more.
Yeah.
And that's what
that's too much. It's too much.
On the couch. Yeah. On the couch, I was like, okay, so I really need to be healed by this guy. So if I completely relax, off it went. And then I was like, okay, can I stop this? Yes. So I tested it and I was like, okay, I'm fine. Then off you go. And I was like spinning and doing all this stuff. And then I could just stop. I was just checking in. Oh, I can stop. Yeah. Okay. And off it would go. But it did, I used it on and off for years, and I don't particularly do it very much now, but it was beautiful to watch. And I recognized it. I was like, oh, I know what she's doing. But it is beautiful to watch. But I think watching it can set people off.
Right.
I think. And I've had a few people on calls do it with me. And they go, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm thinking, I know what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know what we've set up here.
Responsibility. Oh.
So interesting, isn't it?
I'm so glad you've said that, because for years I wasn't sure whether that was what it was. I had an idea, and whenever I looked at Kundalini, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Yeah, but Shakti. Somebody told me, oh, that's Shakti dancing, and I didn't know what it meant. But of course, Shakti is energy, energy dancing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it takes different forms. I used to do Tai Chi, not trained. I'd be like, oh, what's
Oh,
this?
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I would do like acupressure on myself.
Mm.
And I started doing acupressure on other people as if I'd been trained, like down the meridians. I didn't know what the meridians were, but I was working on them. It
Yeah.
just took a form of like healing, spontaneous healing. It was
Well,
just,
it's coming through you, isn't it?
yeah.
It's not,
And I
you know,
knew,
I don't think we
but I
need
knew the
training.
personality wasn't doing it. At that point,
Yeah.
I'd not
Yeah.
woken up
Yeah.
to see that it was spontaneous movement. I was
Yeah.
going, oh, well, I just knew what to do. So I would sit next to somebody, put my hand on them and just connect to their breath. And then it was as if the personality went to one side and I would just spontaneously do stuff. I mean, I'd be like standing the other side of the room, like angel wings. Mine started to take sound. I used to,
Mine too. Oh, I've
oh,
got all
good.
sorts
There
coming
you
out of
go.
there.
Yeah.
You want to hear some of
Yeah.
the songs that have come out in another
Really?
language?
Yeah, like, yeah. So I can like
Voices.
Native American chanting and tapping,
Yeah, yeah,
all sorts. Yeah.
yeah. Gorgeous. Definitely another chat about that one.
Yes, I might have to interview you with that because I always think, I felt for people who are struggling with it, don't know what it is.
Mm.
I mean, you've obviously
It was
even
terrifying for a while, I'm not
it
going to
can be,
lie,
yeah.
for a few years, because there was a lot
Luckily,
of
I didn't.
anxiety with it.
Yeah.
Because as well, when I looked into it, some of the stuff around it's quite terrifying.
Yeah, I think because people, if you push it, I've known people that really burnt themselves out. They've had it and really wanted it.
Mm,
And when you push it, it can burn you out. I've known
mm,
people say, "Oh, I had to go to bed for 3 days." I'm like, "Well, what were you doing?" They were like, "Well, I just kept going." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, now you gotta let your
yeah,
body rest, not keep
yeah,
firing it through, not keep, firing it up.
mm,
You've got to be gentle with it." And so I think in the wrong mindset of more is more and more is better, you could get
yeah,
yourself in trouble.
yeah,
Yeah. That's why
mm,
it's not something I play with for
yeah,
people. That's
yeah.
not, I don't feel, I feel like it's this almost sacred thing that should only be shared with people who know what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, for
Um,
me, it's just because when it does come through, it just feels so beautiful. It's
oh,
like
it
it's so
looks stunning.
graceful now,
Yeah.
but it wasn't that in the beginning. It was a lot of this, not quite so attractive.
But maybe we could have a conversation because it might be nice to help others.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
even you've learnt you didn't
Yeah,
quite know whether it was or
didn't
whether
have
it
a clue.
wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. And it shows that, this spontaneous movement of just walking, of just talking, is the same.
yeah.
It's just that we apply it to a separate self.
Yes.
If you watch your legs walking, they're just walking. There's nobody making them walk. Just like the spontaneous movements, there's some letting go and then just letting it all happen. That's actually what's happening with everything.
Mm,
We just feel like there's a mental overlay, uh, claiming it all, saying, yeah, I'm doing it, I'm walking, you spontaneously jump out of bed and you don't
yeah.
notice. But if I remember going, okay, I'm just going to lie here and see if I get up. And then all of a sudden, you notice you're getting out of bed. And the bath as well. I do it in the bath. I'm like,
That's a
okay, I'm just
fun.
going to lie here, see
That's a
what
funny
happens.
one, isn't it? When you kind of thinking, right, I'm going to get up in a minute. I'm going to get up in a minute. And it's like, at what point does that decision
You
actually
don't
become an
see a
action?
decision. There's a spontaneous movement,
It's
and then the
spontaneous.
mind says,
Yeah,
oh, I'm up. I
yeah,
must do this. I must do that. I've got to do this and I've got to do that. I got
yeah,
up. Yeah,
yeah.
you're right. If you
That's a
get to
really good
see.
one, isn't it, to
And
see?
it's actually, you see there's a delayed reaction all the time. There's the movement and then the claiming is slightly delayed. Like if you reach for your bag when you're leaving, say you've got something really important to deliver to somebody, a parcel or something, and you're going out the door and you grab it. And then there's oh, thank goodness I remembered. There's an
Yeah,
whole character that's so pleased that they remember. Well, they didn't. The hand reached out for the package. You stopped in your tracks and reached for the package. Then there was a claiming of, oh, I'm so glad I remembered. It's all happening afterwards.
wow.
And when you watch it, it's almost revealed to you. I've seen it happen really slowly.
Mm,
I've seen myself stop and then reach, and
yeah,
then all of the information come afterwards. I'm like, oh my goodness.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was so delayed that time.
I'm finding a lot of stuff at the minute around. I think I'm going to do something, and none of it is happening. Like honestly, this week with work, my normal work, which is recruitment, and I'm
Oh
like,
yeah,
right, I
yeah,
really
yeah,
need to do some work, like really need to. And honestly, everything but that is happening. And I'm like,
yeah. But there will be time for that.
yeah.
So what tends to happen is if we just allow the right thing at the right time is done. And if we don't do that, so if there's some sort of adopting of a separate self that needs to control this, the doer, then you start doing the thing that you think you should be doing, and it's really hard work.
Yeah, total resistance. Yeah.
If you let go, you'll find you'll come round to doing that work at the right time, and it'll flow, and you're like, ah,
yes.
oh. So that's what David would point to as effortless being.
Yeah.
To just do what brings you joy. Just be in that effortless being. And you know when you're not, when it's contracted, when there's a push and pull, when there's a, why isn't this working? I can't, it's just
nothing works. Nothing works when it's like that. Yeah.
Totally. So it's like you're going against the natural flow, but it can be, it just gets a little bit of time to get used to doing it, surrendering to everything all the time, and not regrouping, reshaping.
Yeah, because it's going against everything you've been taught. Like
got to do, got to do, got to do, got to lift, got to do, got to do.
Like career and life has been very much, I've been very driven and very proactive, and I make things happen, and
it's worked.
That's fallen away. But I really see how the stuff just happens anyway.
And maybe what we thought was the right thing to be doing isn't the right thing to be doing.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And so like these small groups, I mean, it was I didn't know what I was doing, creating a survey and making this spreadsheet all of a sudden makes sense, because I was like, I need to get all the information in one place. Now I've got the survey, how do I get it in one place? And I was like, oh, there's a plus button here. Oh,
wow.
I mean, I couldn't have, if I'd engaged the mind, I would have gone off and watched videos and tried to work it out, and and it was like, oh, now it's all in one place.
Done for you, just done for you. Brilliant.
So it's it's things, as David said, things come to you. And it's just getting used to that idea, because we're reaching.
Yeah.
Got to do, grasping at things. And like that drive to get things done is just the pattern of behavior that and the mind can still, I remember hearing, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? Going, what is that? It's like on repeat. What am I doing? What am I doing? This idea of a me that needs to know what it's doing constantly. And that's so interesting, because I wasn't responding to but it was still going. And I was like, what am I doing? Oh, I have no idea. So I don't know why you keep asking.
Yeah. Oh.
So yeah, it's the whole thing is just very, very interesting now. Yeah. So maybe we might do something on the whole Kundalini thing.
Yeah, I'd love to have a chat about that. That'd be great.
We're not saying that we're experts on it. We're just sharing our experiences.
Yeah, because
in case somebody's looking, somebody feels a bit lost and they want real life, explanations that they can say, oh, that's what it is. Oh, and she says not to do it, and that if you go into fear, then it is very scary.
The fear, it is scary. Yeah.
So yeah, brilliant. Maybe we'll do that. We'll see if that unfolds.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Collette. It's beautiful to chat with you, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, if you ever just want a quick chat with me, if there was any backwards and forwards you want to iron out.
I think I'd love to have a session. I'd love to have a session with you. There's a few areas where I'm a bit stuck, so definitely,
Yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you so much.
You just get in touch.
I will do. Okay, thank you. Bye. Bye.